This is Dan Dix here reporting for Press for Truth, coming at you here today with some incredibly important information that everyone needs to understand. So let's jump right into it. Former Hamas leader Khalid Mashal calls for Day of Jihad on Friday the 13th and tells Muslims to take to the streets in protest against Israel. The Hamas leader is calling for a global Muslim uprising in a day of revenge on Friday. And this threat is not being taken lightly. New York City on high alert for lone wolves after Hamas attack on Israel, and the Toronto police are preparing for potential terror called for on Friday the 13th. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has called for every single Hamas operative to die, and he also said that Hamas and ISIS are one and the same.
Every Hamas operative will die. Hamas is ISIS. We will crush them and get rid of them, just as the world crushed and got rid of ISIS.
Now keep it in mind when he says that ISIS is Hamas, because the information I'm about to reveal next is a bombshell in this information war. On Monday, May 18th, 2015, the government watchdog group Judicial Watch published a selection of formally classified documents that were obtained from the U.S. Department of Defense and the State Department, and the document reveals that the Obama administration knew that the Al-Qaeda terrorists were planning the Benghazi attack 10 days before it happened. But perhaps more importantly, these declassified documents are really just another piece of growing evidence that the West has funded and trained and promoted the ISIS terror group in the Middle East. You can see the documents are dated in 2012, and they're coming from the Defense Intelligence Agency. And it's more than just unintended consequences of Western war policies that have been aimed at here, and they still do aim at isolating Bashar al-Assad. Now, this document, as you can see here, was formally classified secret, and it predicted the rise of ISIS. And far from describing them as an enemy, they're viewed as a strategic asset. Hence, of course, the funding and training of this armed opposition to the Syrian government. And the report was shared among various government agencies, including CENTCOM, the CIA, the FBI, the DHS, and the NGA, and the State Department, just to name a few. And these declassified documents state that for the West Gulf countries and Turkey, who support the opposition, or ISIS, and it goes on to say here, there is a possibility of establishing a declared or undeclared Salafist principality in eastern Syria, and this is exactly what the supporting powers to the opposition want in order to isolate the Syrian regime. So do you get it yet, guys? ISIS was a creation of the West so that they could destabilize the Middle East and move in under the guise of a humanitarian mission. Well, over a decade ago, I exposed all of this on an Iranian state news station where I warned who the real enemy is. We have to remember there's a large propaganda campaign going on here in the West to convince everyone that the violence and the bloodshed is coming at the hands of the Assad government. Meanwhile, we've known for decades now that the U.S., along with British and Israeli criminal elements within the intelligence networks, have been the ones funding, training, arming these Al-Qaeda rebels and creating the chaos and generating the mayhem in order to provide an excuse for military intervention under the guise of humanitarianism. So I think Aleppo is absolutely important to continue to pay attention to because what happens there could certainly trigger the rest of this ongoing situation there in Syria. We have to understand that there's been a concerted effort over the last few decades for a complete, total takeover of the Middle East, one nation at a time. We've seen it with Iraq. We've seen it as recently as with Libya. And so these efforts are certainly going to continue with Syria in this proxy war, which many of us fear that the bigger picture here is also an eventual military-led intervention in Iran. I think they have to focus on Syria first, because of the allies there, and if they manage to get their stronghold, take over Aleppo there, the next phase may very well be to have an opportunity to infiltrate or take over Hezbollah, which would open up the door for an Iran invasion. So that's why it's incredibly important to continue to expose this propaganda for what it is, so that we can counter that and hopefully bring some awareness to some people here in the West that this is not going to be beneficial for the Syrian people. I mean, who made the United States and Israel and Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Britain, and others the global police here? If the Syrian people want to oust Assad, it should be completely up to them to do so, and not outside military forces who are imposing this on the Assad regime.
How do you interpret the role the mainstream media has played as far as the situation in Syria goes?
Well, getting the people behind this idea of a need for military intervention is absolutely key to be able to go in there. And I think that's why we're seeing such a ramping up of the propaganda and the spin campaign over here in regards to the situation in Syria. There's so many conflicting reports, it's almost hard to keep track of everything that's going on. You mentioned earlier there was some intelligence officers who were captured, and as I understand it, some chemical weapons may have potentially been obtained by the Al-Qaeda rebels from Libya through Turkey, and we have to be careful of the scenario of a false flag type event, where if this propaganda campaign does not work, they may try to stage some sort of chemical attack, which would be blamed on the Assad government. Of course, this would be done by the Al-Qaeda rebels, to be blamed on Assad to provide the excuse, once again, to intervene militarily. So if this propaganda campaign does not hold up, we have to be very aware of the fact that they may take it to the extent of launching a false flag type scenario there in Syria. But once again, the most important thing we can do here in the West is try to counter this propaganda and let the people of the world know that it is indeed the Al-Qaeda, American, Israeli-funded rebels who are the ones responsible for this, the loss of civilians and the bloodshed going on there right now. Sound familiar, folks? History is indeed repeating itself, and we're now seeing it start to happen again on the global stage. So getting back to this Friday the 13th threat, well, guess what? We've seen that before as well, and we know what happened. I certainly haven't forgotten about this. ISIS leader threatens Canada, says it will fight to the last man in audio recording. Public Safety Minister Stephen Blaney says a new Islamic State group, ISIS, recording that threatens Canada reaffirms the need for vigilance against terrorist threats. In a statement released to Global News, Blaney says Canada remains committed to doing what is necessary to protect our nation and citizens. And guess what happened, folks? Nothing. Except for the fact that some new anti-terrorism bills and legislations got reinvigorated. On Twitter, Blaney also referenced a new anti-terrorism bill that would give the Canadian Security Intelligence Service more latitude to obtain a court-ordered warrant authorizing security investigations abroad. It also seeks to strengthen protection of intelligence sources. He then goes on here to say, our Conservative government is committed to safeguarding Canada from terrorism by strengthening security agencies in surveillance, detention, and arrest. We are working diligently to strengthen the tools available to the law enforcement community. The Protection of Canada from Terrorist Act is just the first steps in our efforts to do that. And just like that, order out of chaos was provided, and the chaos wasn't even necessary. But this time, things might be different. When you consider how people are reacting to these recent attacks, it shouldn't come as a surprise to know that governments will provoke or sometimes initiate these retaliatory attacks. So we're going to talk about all of this and much more in this video, but really quickly before we do, I want to remind you guys that in troubling times like these, it's incredibly important to protect whatever assets you have before the you-know-what hits the fan. And that's why I wanted to take a quick moment to tell you about my friends at Patriot Gold Group. Guys, when you call the number on the screen, you'll get connected to a free consultant. This is an investor's guide who will help you set up a plan moving forward. And what these guys specialize in is IRAs and 401ks that are backed by precious metals like physical gold and silver. It's absolutely awesome. This is a great hedge against a dollar crash. This is a hedge against inflation. And these guys have top-notch customer service. They're rated #1 gold IRA dealer by Consumer Affairs for 5 years in a row. So once again, you call that number on the screen during business hours or click the top link in the description below, you will get connected to a real live person, not some AI chatbot robot, a real person who's going to help you set up a plan moving forward, guys. So please call the number on the screen or check that link in the top description today to get your assets out of the bank and into gold and silver. All right, guys, I wanted to start off this video today by talking a little bit about the brief history of why Friday the 13th is considered to be an unlucky day, because it actually has relevance to what's happening today. On October 13th, 1307, King Philip IV of France ordered the arrests of the Knights Templar because they were accused of engaging in heresy and immorality. They were a military order that became absolutely massive and powerful throughout the Middle Ages because of the huge donations they were getting from the kings of Europe. The arrest warrant for the Templars read, "God is not pleased. We have enemies of the faith in the kingdom." In order to join the Knights Templars, there were admission ceremonies where the recruit would be forced to spit on the cross and to deny Christ's divinity. The king and the pope at the time saw this as an evil threat, and on Friday, October the 13th, 1307, they ordered a large portion of the Knights Templars to be murdered. In fact, many of them were burned at the stake. And that's why it's been considered bad luck ever since that day, but you're not going to learn that from the history books or from Google. Fast forward now over 700 years, and tomorrow is Friday, October 13th, and you now have a man calling for global jihad on behalf of Hamas, a group that was created by Israeli and American intelligence. A screenshot of a video on X, first posted on YouTube, shows Khalid Mashal, the former leader and founding member of Hamas, who allegedly called on Muslims earlier this week to unleash a day of rage on Friday. X user Brother Rashid, a former Muslim, now follower of Christ, has been the first to share the contents of Mashal's speech. He outlined the key points. To show anger, especially next Friday in Muslim countries, and also among Muslim diaspora around the world. He called it the Friday of Al-Aqsa flood. He said this will send a message of rage to Zionists and to the Americans. He asked for financial help from all Muslims around the world to help with their money. He called it financial jihad. And he asked Muslims to give to the fighters of Gaza in order to compensate them for the destruction. He asked political pressure from Muslim leaders and Muslim nations to stop Israel's military invasion of Gaza, and the most important thing, he asked all Muslims around the world to carry jihad by their souls, to fight and be martyrs for Al-Aqsa. He wants Muslims to fight against the Jews, starting with Muslims who live in the countries surrounding Israel, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt, but also other countries, to go to the borders and to try to enter, each by his own means. He said, this is the time for jihad to be applied on the ground rather than just in theory. He asked the Mujahideen to go in long caravans to spill their blood on the land of Palestine. The final words of Mashal's speech included, funds are important, but today we are asking for your blood and souls to be sacrificed for Palestine. This is certainly a threat that is not to be taken lightly, but we have to consider who the real enemy is. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Hamas were all created by Israel and the US, or more specifically, by Mossad and the CIA. They continue to use these boogeymen to put the fear in the minds of the masses any single time that they need to do it. And they do this to provide the excuse to invade sovereign nations, all under the guise of it being a humanitarian mission. I've shown you the documents that prove this to be true. So my friends, whatever happens tomorrow, if anything, please don't forget where it's actually coming from. Criminal elements within the intelligence communities of the US and Israel are the ones who are behind it all. And the goal for them is to provide order out of chaos. So let's be ready for whatever they may bring, whether that be bombs or bills and legislation that's going to be passed. Folks, please be sure to share this video. This is the kind of information that your friends and family are certainly not going to see on the 6 o'clock news. And don't forget to check out my friends at Patriot Gold Group. Once again, you could click that top link in the description below or call the number that was on the screen. That's all for today, my friends. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, please click that thumbs up button. Share this video with your friends and family who you think need to see it the most. And stay tuned, we're going to have more video reports coming soon, God willing. This is Dan Dix reporting for Press for Truth. We all want truth. The truth will set you free.